Once upon a time, the world was in turmoil. Fertile lands became blighted, volcanoes erupted, the ocean spoiled, and the wind stopped blowing. People were in a state of despair, waiting for the day that someone would come to save them. Then one day, 4 individuals appeared, sheltering crystals within the palm of their hands, heralding their status as heroes. And a strong-willed warrior that would recklessly delve into the heart of battle in an effort to mow down the enemies first, and gather every last bit of treasure. Despite this, legends state that he really cared about his companions, and would defend them to the last if things got hairy. Misako, a compassionate woman who was versed in the art of white magic. In the towns that they visited, she would selflessly care for the sick, and treat injuries before the party headed off into the unknown, though it's said that she loved to sing, and always spent an exceedingly long amount of time caring for her hair. Hiro was a thief, who is said to swing his blade faster than the speed of sound. His attacks always struck true, despite his sometimes forgetful nature. Finally there was Ven, a versatile mage with the skill to use both white and black magic. Though he had a frail constitution, and was considered the weakest of the 4, his mental acuity saw him devising the best course of action to navigate a hazardous situation. Together, the 4 heroes supplemented each other's weaknesses, and in so doing were able to bring peace to the land. Final Fantasy, originally released for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1987, is a product of the vision of Hironobu Sakaguchi. Working for Square at the time, after having already produced a few titles in other genres that were deemed as failures, this was his last chance to create something successful and stay in the game industry. Little did he know at the time that it would serve as the first of many Final Fantasy titles and spin-offs that would see the company now known as Square-Enix become the powerhouse producer that it is today. For the purposes of this review, I played the 20th anniversary edition of Final Fantasy on the Sony PlayStation Portable, which released in Japan and America in 2007, and PAL regions in 2008. The game opens with little fanfare. We are given a brief cutscene detailing that the world is in a state of decline, and then are unceremoniously dumped onto the world map with no direction. As the nearest town is but a stone's throw away, the party enter the kingdom of Cornelia to find that the princess has been kidnapped by a former knight known as Garland. How original. Tracking him down to the Chaos Shrine, the party bests him in battle, and a short-lived peace is restored to the realm. After learning that there is something greater at play, the adventure turns into a quest to rekindle the light in the 4 elemental crystals around the world, to restore elemental balance and return the environment to normal. What I liked about the game was that the heroes could be whoever you wanted them to be. Not only do you get to name each of your 4 characters, but you must also assign them a class that will grant them status bonuses or abilities as the game progresses. There is a total of 6 classes to choose from: Warrior, Thief, Monk, White Mage, Black Mage, and Red Mage. You must choose wisely, as whatever you select will be locked in for the entire game. Warriors and Monks are strong physical attackers, the Thief is fast, and the 3 mages can use magic, White and Black being strictly locked to those practices, whilst Red can dabble in both schools at a lower proficiency. If you are thorough in your exploration of the world, you may get the opportunity to upgrade your classes, which can grant the ability to use basic magic to the Warrior and Thief, and grant access to higher forms of magic to the White Mage and Black Mage, for example. Much like Dungeons and Dragons, magic is designated by level. There are 8 levels of magic in total, and each has an intelligence threshold to be able to use. Additionally, each character can only learn 3 spells from each level, though don't fret as the number of available spells is nowhere near what D&D offers. The game isn't really all that difficult if you spend the time grinding, so you don't have to worry about choosing the incorrect spells, though I would highly recommend that you pick up both Temper and Haste if you want to have an easier time. If you do want to forget a spell and learn a different one, that is also possible, though it is worth noting that spells can only be learned at a store in one of many towns and cities of the world. However, each town hosts one store boasting a specific level of spell, so you may need to search around the world for the spell you are looking for, especially so in the case when the base classes upgrade, allowing magic use to characters that formerly could not even comprehend its complexities. For the most part, the game consists of travelling to a town and solving its problem by navigating a nearby dungeon. At first, travel on the world is via foot, though later you'll gain a boat, a canoe, and eventually an airship, though the airship is only as useful as the ground it can land upon, which in many cases is as rare as an airport in Vatican City. Dungeons themselves are a mess of twisting corridors, some ending in rooms that don't even contain any treasure, which was a bit disappointing. Also, the battles are random encounters that are set a little too high for my liking. 1 minute you're walking along, and then suddenly you're in a battle. Get out of that one, and a few steps later you're drawn into another. At least the saving grace is that battles usually don't tend to last that long, although if you are like me and accidentally stumble into the troll corridor in the Cavern of Earth, well, maybe you'll end up with no hair like the legendary hero, Ant. When you enter a battle, your characters will be lined up on the right with the enemies on the left. In the original version of the game, if you attacked an enemy and defeated it, if your next character targeted the same opponent, they'd hit thin air and waste a turn. Thankfully for this version of the game, the attack is redirected toward another enemy. In battle, you can attack, use magic, use an item, or try to escape. Some equipment can be used repeatedly as an attack item to do things such as cast spells that can even be used by characters that have no magic aptitude, which I thought was handy. Once you select your actions, the battle will play out with a random turn order. There never seemed to be any rhyme or reason to the rhythm of who attacked when, which is usually governed by a speed stat. A higher speed statistic in Final Fantasy, rather than allowing you to attack first, determines how many attacks within a turn a character gets. The higher their speed, the more times they will swing their blade, dealing more damage, which can be amplified by using the haste spell on them. Whilst initially I was excited to go back to the game that birthed the Final Fantasy series, overall I must admit I was a little disappointed by the narrative. I know it's to be expected coming from an age when JRPGs just really weren't a thing, but I really would have appreciated something more to sink my teeth into. Well, at least we have Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers that heavily drew from this game, which tells a much better story. The thing that really irritated me was that some characters like Princess Sarah you never see again throughout the entire story. Like, what's the point of her even being there? Many of the towns are just empty shells with generic NPCs spouting random nonsense dialogue with the occasional clue as to where to go next. There aren't even any support characters that stand out to make you care about the game or its world. I feel like if this game were released today, and not back in 1987, it would have been bundled into a shopping trolley, pushed off an elevated performance stage, with the hopes of providing its occupants a concussion. If the story in general has you on a downer, then there are 4 additional dungeons that you can undertake that first appeared in the Game Boy Advance version of the game. They provide somewhat of a challenge and can even grant you equipment that is better than what is found in the base game. On my track through one of the dungeons, I ended up fighting a boss that appears in Final Fantasy III, which I thought was a nice surprise. The Chaos Shrine also contains an extra dungeon, the Labyrinth of Time, which is unique to this 20th anniversary edition, and also the iOS version of the game. Unfortunately, I didn't undertake this dungeon, as I generally don't tend to dabble in post-game content, and by the time I'd unlocked it, I just wanted to be done with the game as I was over-grinding and the overly high encounter rate. Compared to the NES version of the game, I liked the update to the pixel art and that Square-Enix stayed true to the original in not changing any of the designs of the towns or dungeons. I thought it was nice to experience the game in the way it was originally presented, design-wise, without having it completely redesigned. Some of the scenes, like diving beneath the water or viewing the converging elemental powers, was a nice touch that added a smidge more to the narrative, though that was only slight. The locations all have had a facelift, with environmental effects such as fog added to give the game more atmosphere. The battle backdrops are all rather detailed and nice to look at, and I appreciated the opening FMV sequence, even though I am not sure how a man fighting a dragon relates to the narrative, but okay. As you're all probably aware, the music of the Final Fantasy series is quite iconic, and did you know that some of the tracks first originated in this game, like the prelude? Whilst composer Nobuo Uematsu had composed for some of Square's other non-JRPG titles before this, it was Final Fantasy that really started him on the trajectory to legendary status, where he refined his compositional talent over the years of making music for the Final Fantasy series. In regard to this game, my favourite track is called Ruined Castle. It plays in the castle ruins near Elfheim, where you meet the king of a ruined kingdom. I love how it replicates the melody of Cornelia Castle, but has a more mellow yet slightly hopeful tone to it, which is rather deceitful considering what happens there. Final Fantasy was the beginning of a series that I would grow to love after experiencing Final Fantasy VII for the first time in 1997. Whilst the game may have been revolutionary at the time it was produced, considering the only other game of its ilk was Enix's Dragon Quest, I cannot in good faith recommend it, unless you like monotonous grinding and a near-absent story. Oh, there will also be long periods of randomly wandering and getting lost. I'm surprised our legendary heroes even completed their journey at all. The game is only around 10 hours, so if you really have nothing else to do and want to see the origins of Final Fantasy, then maybe it is worth your time. But you didn't get that recommendation from me. At least, the games in the series can only get better from here, right? By the way, as gamers, sometimes we didn't have access to the first game in a series either because it wasn't localized in the West at the time it was produced, or if you're a new gamer, maybe you were just too young when it was originally released, or maybe you weren't interested in games at all at that time. Are there any series where you went back to the first game and thought, how did people think this was fun? Let me know in the comments. This has been Venwa with a review of the 20th anniversary edition of Final Fantasy for the Sony PlayStation Portable. If you enjoyed this review, feel free to like and subscribe for more great JRPG content. As always, thanks for watching, stay awesome, and I hope to see you all again next time. Take care and bye bye for now.